Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Bullony Basketball, Season 2, Episode 2. And I'm here with my co host, Johnny. How's it going, Johnny?
What's going on, everybody? Garrett, hope everything is going well on your end. Super excited to be back and super excited because in between now and the next episode, we will have some meaningful basketball games to talk about. So, this is our last episode of prep, our last episode of predictions, and then we'll finally be able to dive into stuff that's actually happening in the regular season. So, super excited for that.
Yes, sir. And we got a lot to talk about today, a lot of teams, a lot of players, and predictions to get through. So, we're going to start off with our standing predictions. And I think we're going to start with the Eastern Conference from the bottom and work our way up for, more dramatic effect. And we're going to start with the 15 seed in the Eastern Conference. Who'd you have 15th, Johnny?
I got the Pistons.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't have the Pistons there, but I mean they're going to be pretty close to there. I'm going to admit that. I had the Cavaliers 15th. Um, but yeah, I think we're just going to like kind of move through these really quickly, and then we'll get into the playoffs, which I think a lot of people would like to talk about. Our 14th seed, I personally had the Knicks. Who'd you have, Johnny?
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. I have the Knicks there as well. I think to me the bottom three teams are pretty clear. It's just the order of those bottom three. But I'm in agreement at 14.
Yeah, and I think I mean perfectly what you said with the bottom three because I have the Pistons at 13th. Uh, who'd you? And I'm assuming you had the Cavaliers 13th.
Yeah, I have the Cavs. I just think the Cavs have uh, more star power, I guess, which sounds kind of weird considering that neither of these teams are very good. But you're getting another year of Sexton. Garland should be better. Kevin Love's still on the squad. I know the Pistons have D Rose and Blake Griffin, but they just have absolutely nothing around it. And so I'm expecting the Cavs to be better than the Pistons. But we're in agreement of that bottom three. I think that's a tier in its own.
Yeah, the only thing I think the Pistons will just be a little bit better because having those two guys, I'm assuming they're going to trade them maybe soon. Uh, but I mean, if they're fully healthy, I mean, Blake Griffin was All NBA like just about a year ago, and D Rose was All Star caliber the past few seasons. So I mean, it's very possible, but I think that they'll edge out those other teams. Moving on to the 12 seed though, who do you have, Johnny?
Yeah, 12. I have Charlotte in the 12th seed.
That's interesting. I have the Orlando Magic, who've been a playoff team the last few years. Um, a little bit different team, not too much though, but they didn't really make too many acquisitions. So I have them 12th. The 11 seed though, I have the Atlanta Hawks, which might seem surprising because I know their offseason was very hyped up. But who do you have 11th, Johnny?
Yeah, I have Orlando at 11, kind of like you mentioned. Didn't do much and no Jonathan Isaac this year. So by not doing much and losing Jonathan Isaac, it seems like it's going to have a net negative effect on that roster. I'm sure we'll dive into the Hawks in a bit when we get there. Um, I too do think that they're a little overhyped, but I don't think that they're going to finish 11th.
Yeah, I think well they'll definitely have a better year than last year. I believe they were last or second to last in the East last season. But moving on to the 10 seed, I have your 12 seed, I believe, the Charlotte Hornets. Who do you have for 10th?
Yeah, I have the Bulls sitting 10th. I think they're going to hover around a playoff ish team, but I don't think that they have enough in this Eastern Conference to actually push for that spot.
Yeah, it's important. It's funny that you mentioned the Bulls because I have them ninth. I think adding Billy Donovan uh, is really going to help, especially guys like Kobe White and also Patrick Williams. I mean, both these guys already look really good in the preseason. You're going to have Levine. I think Markkanen's going to have a completely different and better role instead of with Jim Boylan. So I have them ninth. But who do you have ninth?
I have the Pacers finishing ninth. No, they made the playoffs last year and they didn't do a whole lot. But I think in the Eastern Conference this year, by not doing a whole lot, it does have a net negative effect. When we get to teams like the Wizards and the Nets themselves, the Wizards, they have Russell Westbrook now, and it's not like they lost John Wall from last year's team because he didn't even play. So you're adding Westbrook to that Wizards team. You're adding KD and Kyrie to that Nets team. So by not doing anything, I think the Pacers are one of those odd teams out that are going to find themselves on the outside looking in.
That's a bit surprising. I have the Pacers coming up soon, but not quite yet. Now we're going to get into our playoff teams. And of course, there's 10 teams that make the play in. I'm assuming you're going to have your top eight in the playoffs when we get to that point. Uh, but moving on to the eight seed, personally, I have the Washington Wizards. I think it's going to be a little bit skeptical how they're going to start off, but they'll definitely be an entertaining team. And I think they should finish top eight. But what about you?
Yeah, I have the Hawks at eighth seed. Like I said, I too do believe that they're a little overhyped. I've seen some projections have them, at that five or six seed, and I think that's just too much to ask for. They obviously added some good pieces like Bogdan and Gallinari, among others. But you're still playing in an Eastern Conference that's pretty balanced up top, where we have a clear understanding of about the top six-ish teams, and so I can't see the Hawks finishing higher than seven seed, and I have them at eighth.
Yeah, and moving on to the seven seed, I actually have the Raptors at seventh. I think it's interesting. I believe last year I had them like at a bottom playoff seed, or maybe even missing the playoffs. I don't remember. Um, so they very well could surprise me and pretty much everyone else again. But I have them seventh. I think they lost a lot down low in Ibaka and Gasol. But what about you? Who do you have seventh?
You have the Wizards at seventh, kind of how I alluded to it earlier. You're adding Russell Westbrook to a team that didn't really have a point guard last year, so you're kind of relieving some of those duties from Bradley Beal, making it easier, bringing back Davis Bertans. You get another year of Rui Hachimura. Thomas Bryant's playing well down low, so I think there's some pieces there. The offense is clearly going to be one of the better offenses again. It's just a matter of how the defense kind of shakes itself out, but I do like that backcourt pairing, and I think that they're going to be able to push for a playoff spot.
Yeah, I think they'll definitely be in contention. As for my sixth seed, I personally have the Miami Heat. Um, they didn't really do a lot this offseason. And last year they finished fifth in the standings. Of course, they did perform in the playoffs and got all the way to the NBA Finals, but this is based off standings, and I'm going to take them six. What about you?
You have Toronto in the sixth seed. You kind of talked about it earlier. They lost all their big guys essentially. The only true big that they got back was Chris Boucher, and I expect him to have a good year, but I'm not sure that it's going to be big enough. It looks like Aaron Baines will start there, so they have some reinforcements, but they just don't have it at the level at which they had last year. Um, the only thing I'm skeptical about putting the Raptors this low at six seed is just that they're such a great regular season team that they normally surprise us. But I do have them at the sixth seed.
Yeah, and moving on to the fifth seed, I personally have Philadelphia. Um, I mean, I think they made a coaching adjustment that was better for their franchise with Doc Rivers instead of Brett Brown. They added some 3-point shooting with Danny Green, Seth Curry. Of course, they lost some defense, in my opinion, with Josh Richardson. And then, adding Dwight Howard, I think he'll be more effective for them than Al Horford. So I have them fifth. But who do you have fifth?
Yeah, I have Philly fifth as well. So I'm not going to waste any time explaining that. You did a wonderful job of doing so.
And moving on now to the four seed, and this is where I actually have the Pacers. I feel like a lot of people don't realize that last year Victor Oladipo missed over half the season. Malcolm Brogdon missed about half the season. Sabonis missed a good chunk. He missed the whole bubble and the playoffs. Miles Turner missed a stretch. T.J. Warren missed some games. I went to a Pacers game last year. T.J. Warren didn't even play. And I believe like some of the guys at the bench as well. So this team was injury riddled all last season, and I believe if they're fully healthy, that they could be one of the scariest teams in the Eastern Conference, especially if Oladipo and Brogdon come back to full form. But who do you have for the fourth seed?
You have Miami in the fourth seed. I know that they didn't do a whole lot this offseason, but a lot of what they're relying on are their young guys just developing. I mean, three of their top six players, Bam Adebayo, Duncan Robinson, and Tyler Harrow, are all still so young that um, you're just expecting them to take that next step. And I think a lot of that is where I'm putting my faith in. And so that's why I have them in the four seed.
Yeah, and as for the third seed, I believe we have the same top three. I don't know if you want to give your third seed first.
They have Brooklyn in the three seed. I think it's going to be this is one of those boomer bust picks, if you will. I expect Brooklyn to fully make the playoffs. It's just a matter of how much both KD and Kyrie are able to play without having to rest. And they have the talent, and I think that they'll be able to put it together. And so I have them at the 3 seed.
I have the Boston Celtics at 3. I believe they'll still be. I don't know if they're quite on par with my top 2 seeds because they lost Gordon Hayward and they didn't really make great acquisitions, in my opinion, as we saw from like what I thought last episode. But I still have Boston at 3. And my 2 seed is the Brooklyn Nets. But do we have the same? Or I guess we won't have the same 2 seed. But do you have Boston at 2?
Yeah, I have Boston at 2. No Kemba to start the year is going to hurt a little. Um, so they're going to have to put Marcus Smart in that starting lineup, and they'll have whatever a couple decent guys off the bench and Jeff Teague and Tristan Thompson or Daniel Tice, whoever doesn't start there. So once again, a lot of it just relies on the development of the young guys of Tatum and Brown to see how far they've ascended.
Yeah, and number 1, I believe we both had the same, the Milwaukee Bucks. Giannis is a multiple-time MVP, just signed the extension as well, so he's going to be in Milwaukee for quite some time now. Adding Drew Holiday, um, I think that they will be the first seed yet again.
Excuse me. Yeah, I don't think there's too much more to be said there. Giannis, best player in the East. They added Drew Holiday, an All-Star. I fully expect them to get that number 1 seed.
Yeah, and now if we move on to the Western Conference, starting with the 15th seed over there, uh, personally, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder, who basically just cleaned house. Are we in agreement there?
Yeah, same thing. While they will have, I guess, what you can call some talent at the beginning of the year with Horford and George Hill, I expect at least one, if not both of those, to be traded at some point in the season, and for them to just roll out their young guns all season. So I do have them as the 15 seed.
Yeah, and speaking of a team of young guns with really not much veteran experience, I had the Sacramento Kings at 14th. Losing Bogdanovich hurts, and they didn't really make too many acquisitions. Hassan Whiteside is nice, but I don't know. I have them 14th.
Yeah, I have the Kings 14 as well. This might be the point then where things shake up and we see our differences, because I think this Western Conference is quite complicated to shake out.
Yeah, and as for my number 13 seed now, it's similar to Orlando, I guess, in the East because I think that there's some teams that progressively got better, more healthy, um, or at least they're expected to next year. I have the Memphis Grizzlies. I know they were fighting for a playoff spot last year, uh, but personally, there's just too many teams that were below them last year that were injured, even around them that were injured in the standings, and there's teams that just got a lot better, in my opinion. So I have the Grizzlies 13.
Yeah, I have Minnesota 13th. I'm not. I think they're a team that's a little bit overhyped. I think that Russell and Cat can work well off of each other, but there's absolutely zero defense on that team. Um, Malik Beasley says he's going to go for all first team defense or all NBA defense. Um, but I just think that they're lacking the not even the talent, but the effort on the defensive end. And they can score, but they're going to have to win their games 140 to 130 if they want to have any chance. And I just don't see that happening in this stacked Western Conference.
Yeah, the defense is definitely a concern for me as well. That's why I had the Timberwolves 12th, but who do you have 12th?
I have the Pelicans 12th. I just don't think that their time is yet. Um, I'll sound like a broken record, but the West is just so deep that it's going to be very hard to fit those teams in, because as we get to the top, we're going to figure out that we think there's maybe 6, 7 locks for playoff teams, and then there's 6 or 7 fighting for the last 2 seeds. And I think Pelicans are on the outside looking in. Steven Adams, I'm not necessarily sure how that's going to work together. David Griffin says Zion's going to play the 3. Not sure how that's going to work. So I think there's some things to be figured out in New Orleans.
Yeah, basically all the reasons you just listed are the reasons why I had the Pelicans 11th. Teams just I feel like are a lot better and expected to be more healthy. Pelicans made some weird moves this offseason, so kind of skeptical. But who's your 11 seed?
I have San Antonio at 11. I tried to get them higher because I think that San Antonio has a very good foundation to build upon. I like the backcourt of Derek White and DeJounte Murray. I think Lonnie Walker's an emerging star. Devin Vassell has already looked good, or Vassell, however you may pronounce it. I like Keldon Johnson. I think we'll see some Luka Samancic this year. You do have some veterans around them in Rudy Gay, DeMar DeRozan, and LaMarcus Aldridge. So I think there's some talent there. I think there's some stuff that Pop can work with. But once again, it's just you're fighting in such a tough Western Conference that I'm not sure I could get them any higher.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like every team you have, I have one spot just higher. I have the Spurs at 10th. Like you said, they have a bunch of young guys. And I mean, some of them even got some experience, not this past year, but the year before in the playoffs, such as like Derek White, and Lonnie Walker and stuff. But I think people are kind of underrating a healthy DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge duo. I feel like is very underrated in the Western Conference, especially with Greg Popovich as the head coach. Um, I'm gonna take them as the 10 seed, but who do you have at 10th?
Yeah, I have Memphis at the 10 seed. Um, I love what Memphis did in the draft. I think you get another year of John Morant, Jaren Jackson. What is his status? I can't. Is he going to be back this season, or is he out all season?
I think he might be back like before the season ends. I don't think he'll be out all year, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think I like what Memphis has, and I like how they're building organically the way they have. John Morant, I do believe, is in for a breakout year. Um, so not a playoff team, but close to it at the 10 seed.
Now as we move on to number 9, this was personally the hardest choice I think I had to make in like all these standings, because I was thinking of like three teams, and I personally I really couldn't choose, so I had to pick the one that I think has the most question marks around how their season's going to end. And I still don't feel good about it, but I picked the Houston Rockets. I know John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins have played really well so far in preseason, but of course we don't know what's going to happen with James Harden. We don't know how well they're all going to fit together. So I had to pick them ninth, and I like I said, I don't feel good about it because there's some other teams that they could very well be better than. But who do you have ninth?
I have the Warriors at 9, and they're a team that I desperately wanted to get into the playoff picture, but just what they have right now, I'm not sure if it's enough to get in. Steph has looked good. We haven't seen Dre or James Wiseman in the preseason yet. But it's just a lot of new pieces, right? It's Oubre's thrown into the mix. You have Wiseman thrown into the mix. Bazemore, Brad Wanamaker via free agency. So it's a lot of pieces that we don't know how they're going to fit together. It's going to take some Steph Curry heroics to get this team into the playoffs. And so that's why I have them at 9.
Yeah, and I think the Stephen Curry heroics are good enough to at least get them in the top 8, and that's why I have them in 8th. And I don't know, it's kind of funny because there's been a rivalry for several years of the Warriors and the Rockets. Uh, But I don't know. I just feel like history has told us that the Warriors typically win that battle. So I'm betting more on the Warriors than the Rockets in this sake. But who do you have as your 8 seed?
I have Phoenix as the 8 seed. They're a team that I've also think is a bit overhyped. Um, but I think they're good enough to get into the playoffs. You added Chris Paul not only as a player but as a leader. Take some of that pressure off of Devin Booker. Will certainly help DeAndre Ayton in the pick and roll game. You got a very gritty veteran in Jay Crowder on that roster. You still do have a couple nice pieces off the bench in Dario Saric. Um, and so I think they have enough to get into the playoffs, and that's why I got them at 8.
Yeah, and like you said, they did lose quite a bit. But I think the veteran leader of Chris Paul will definitely help them get over the hump and end their playoff drought. And that's why I have them 7th. But who's your 7th seed?
I have Utah at 7. Um, it's a team that can certainly climb up in the rankings, but I just think that the teams above them are just a little too much for Utah. Donovan Mitchell is one of my favorite players, and I do think he's going to take that next step. But I'm not sure if what he has around him is enough to really propel him any further in the West.
That's interesting. Now I don't have like the next one following like usual on these lists, but I have my 6th seed as the Dallas Mavericks. I think Luca is definitely going to be putting on a show early in the season. I believe Kristaps Porzingis is still going to miss some time early on, uh, but I think that the Mavericks, I really wasn't that fond of a lot of their moves that they made this offseason. So I'm going to put them at 6, a comfortable playoff spot, secured of playing in the play-in as well. But who do you have 6?
I have Houston at 6. I don't want to necessarily predict the James Harden trade, and if Harden is not traded, I do think that between him, John Wall, Cousins, Christian Wood, PJ Tucker, Eric Gordon, that they have the players to get them into the playoffs quite comfortably, and I think 6 is kind of what embodies that.
Yeah, and I will say if the Rockets, I mean, if Harden's there all year long and things work out, I mean, they could be as high as maybe this fifth seed for me. But in fifth, I have the Utah Jazz. I mean, they've been a middle of the tier playoff team for several years now. Uh, I think that they're just a lock to get in my opinion. So I have them fifth.
You have Portland at 5. Um, in the last episode, I kind of talked about the moves that they made and how I like the moves they made. Um, so I do think that they're poised to have a good year. I think Covington is a huge addition. You're getting Zach Collins healthy. Hopefully, that big three can stay healthy. Nurkic has had some issues doing so, but I think 5 seed is just a comfortable seed for them to land at. I think it's hard to crack top 3. And then I'll talk about the two teams I'll talk about the team I have ahead of them after you talk about your 4th seed.
Yeah, fourth, I had the same as your fifth, which was the Portland Trailblazers. I think that they made a lot of additions. They're going to be a lot more healthy um, this season. They had a huge list of injuries last year, which is like the biggest reason they were eighth. And I think some people forget that. But this is a team that just the season before made the Western Conference Finals. So I think that they're definitely going to be, and they've been a 3 seed for like, the 2 years before that. So I think they're going to be somewhere higher in the standings this year. And that's why I have them fourth. But what about you?
Yeah, contrary to your beliefs on the Mavericks offseason, I do like what they did through the draft and through trade, acquiring Josh Richardson, already the best offense in NBA history. I think Luka. I mean, I don't know how many more steps Luka can take just because of how good he already is, but I think he's going to carry this team to the 4th seed.
Very interesting. And now for our top three, which I believe is the same for both conferences now. Number three for me, I have the LA Clippers. Um, I mean, I think with Kawhi and Paul George, they're going to be looking for redemption. But I mean, primarily that's going to happen in the playoffs as well. Of course, I think they're going to still try in the regular season because last year, when it seemed like that wasn't the case, that, we all know what happened. So I got them top three, though. But what about you?
Yeah, it looks like we're going to end up with that same scenario in the Eastern Conference where we had the top 3, but we flipped 2 and 3. I'm going to go Denver in the 3 seed. Um, I just think that obviously losing Jeremy Grant was big, but to be able to get a guy like JaMychal Green in there, Michael Porter Jr. is going to take that next step, and so I think he'll fill that void as best as he can, and so I got them in the 3 seed.
Well, it's not going to be quite as you expected because we're not necessarily flipping those seeds. I have the LA Lakers as the second seed. Um, and I mean, I'll get into my first seed in a second here, but I have the LA Lakers second. I think that for the regular season, I mean, they added two of the top two six-man of the year candidates, Dennis Schroeder and Montrezl Harrell. Um, I think that they definitely improved this offseason, so I got them second.
Yeah, I have the Clippers second. You kind of talked about it already. I think the Serge Ibaka move is huge. Batum is that low risk. Who knows what'll happen with him? Kennard is what I consider an upgrade over Shamit. So I think they'll finish as the second seed.
Yeah, and as for my number one seed, I have the Denver Nuggets. Now, I think that the Nuggets, I think this is going to be a next level year for them. I think they're going to take an even bigger step. Uh, Michael Porter Jr. is going to get a way bigger role, and I think Jamal Murray is bound to have an actual All Star season. I know he had an All Star, well, superstar bubble, I should say, uh, but I think that he's going to be an All Star caliber player this year. And I think that he will make the All Star team. So that's why I have them first. But what about you?
You have the Lakers number one. Even resting, even LeBron sitting, AD sitting, they just have so much talent on that team that I think that they'll be able to kind of go through cruise control during the regular season and still lock up that 1 seed.
Yeah, and I think that that pretty much does it. I don't know. We should probably give a rundown now of our lists. Do you want to give your rundown first?
Yeah, you want to do Western Conference first or Eastern?
Let's start with the East.
Okay. Uh, from 15 to 1, Detroit, New York, Cleveland, Charlotte, Orlando, Chicago, Indiana, and then the top 8 seeds. The top 8 seeds: Atlanta, Washington, Toronto, Philadelphia, Miami, Brooklyn, Boston, and Milwaukee. Where do you land?
All right, so and my East was from 15 to 1. We got the Cleveland, New York, Detroit, Orlando, Atlanta, Charlotte, Chicago, and then my top eight: Washington, Toronto, Miami, Philadelphia, Indiana, Boston, Brooklyn, and Milwaukee. And now moving on to the West, you want to give yours first?
Yeah, it's fine. So from 15 to 1 again, Oklahoma City, Sacramento, Minnesota, New Orleans, San Antonio, Memphis, and Golden State all looking on the outside in. 8 to 1, Phoenix, Utah, Houston, Portland, Dallas, Denver, Clippers, Lakers.
All right. And as for my West, once again, starting from 15 all the way to 1, Oklahoma City, Sacramento, Memphis, Minnesota, New Orleans, San Antonio, and Houston. And from 8 to 1, I have Golden State, Phoenix, Dallas, Utah, Portland, the LA Clippers, the LA Lakers, and the Denver Nuggets. So, I mean, we had some consistency. I think the bottom two or three, like in the top and bottom of each conference, and of course, the middle teams is kind of hard to predict. So, um, yeah. But we're gonna move on now to the individual awards. Starting with the most prestigious award of them all, MVP. Do you want to give your take on who's gonna win it this year?
Yeah, I'm betting on a KD comeback. I have the Nets as the 3 seed, so I think that's high enough for him to secure that award. Close second for me is Luka Doncic, but I have KD.
Yeah, I think MVP is also Kevin Durant. We mentioned this, I believe, our last episode of last season. Um, But I don't know. I think if the Denver Nuggets do get the first seed, don't be surprised if Nikola Jokic is getting some MVP votes. Um, I think that they'll definitely have a good chance if so. As for Defensive Player of the Year, though, I have the Lakers' Anthony Davis. I think that he had a pretty good case last year to win it, but I think this year he will win it. What about you?
Yeah, I think AD is the easy answer, but I'm going to go Ben Simmons. I think that AD is going to sit some games, and so I think that might hurt his case a little. And I think just the versatility of Ben Simmons will help his case, considering that he can guard 1 through 5.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like with Defensive Player of the Year, especially, there's like trends in a way. It seemed like the award criteria was based on like the traditional lockdown rim protecting center, and then sometimes it's like the more versatile wing. So depends which way it's trending. Of course, Giannis kind of hard to gauge where he is, like where to piggyback off that for this season. But as for six man of the year, I personally have the Brooklyn Nets Spencer Dinwiddie. I think he's one of the easier choices on this list. Uh, but I don't know really too many other people that will be competing. But I guess we'll see what Johnny has to say. Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I have Gallinari or Bogdanovich, whichever one doesn't start. But if both start, I have Jordan Clarkson of the Utah Jazz.
That's interesting. I think Jordan Clarkson does make a good case as well. But as for most improved player, this is someone I was considering last year for the Orlando Magic, Markel Fultz. I know I had them pretty low in the standings, but I think this year Fultz's role is going to go way up. I see him being probably the first or second option on the Magic this year. I think it's going to be a good year for him. But what about you?
I have Christian Wood of the Houston Rockets. For me, a close second is OG Anunoby. I think the way that the Raptors develop their players is just so much better than just about every other team that you see these leaps taken. So I think OG Anunoby is a close second, but I'm going to go Christian Wood.
Yeah, as for Rookie of the Year, I don't know if you want to give your pick first.
Yeah, I'll go James Wiseman. I don't think he's going to be the best player out of this draft, but I just think he's a player that's position of need for the Warriors and is going to get that time right away. And so I think James Wiseman locks it up.
I personally think LaMelo will win it. I know he's kind of like come off the bench for some of the preseason games, but I feel like he will make his mark pretty early and probably take the role of, I would say, Terry Rozier. I think Devonte Graham is a better two guard around LaMelo. So I think that by that time, and they could still trade Terry Rozier, which was some of the rumors in the offseason as well. But moving on to the last big award, Coach of the Year, who do you got winning it?
I think we're gonna be in agreement here considering your standings. I'm gonna go Mike Malone.
Yep, I also had Mike Malone. I think, especially if Denver gets the first seed, I thought he could have very well won it in 2018, 2019 when they jumped from a non-playoff team all the way to the second seed in the West. But I think now it's his time to win it. So moving on now to the NBA playoffs. I think the easy way to do this is saying every winner that we have, and I might even make it quicker than that based off some of the stuff. I mean, you guys know the standings. You guys know who's going to be playing who based on what we just said. But you want to, or do you want me to give you my winners first, or do you want to go first?
Yeah, go ahead. You can go Eastern Conference first.
Okay. I mean, I'll run through every single team, but to keep it easy, I pretty much had every top seed winning except for one. I have the Bucks beating the Wizards. I have the Pacers actually beating the 76ers. Um, I have the Brooklyn Nets beating the Toronto Raptors, and the upset here, I have the Miami Heat as a lower seed beating the Boston Celtics. Um, because I mean they did beat them last year, and of course the Celtics won't have Hayward, so that only hurts them a little bit more in my opinion. As for the West, all the top seeds, I have Denver over Golden State, Portland over Utah, the Lakers over the Suns, and the Clippers over the Mavericks. But if it is a Denver versus Golden State matchup in the first round, that could be an upset, and that could be very surprising. That was really hard. I'm like, I don't think I've ever had to do like a 1-8 that was this tough in a long time. But what do you got for your playoffs first round?
So first round in the East, I have Milwaukee over Atlanta, Boston over Washington, Brooklyn over Toronto, Philadelphia over Miami. In the West, have it chalk. I have all the higher seeds winning. So Lakers over Phoenix, Clippers over Utah, Denver over Houston, and Dallas over Portland.
Okay, pretty nice. And we're gonna move on now to the second round. Do you want to give yours first?
Yep. So in the second round, I have Milwaukee beating Philadelphia and Brooklyn beating Boston. Um, in the Western Conference, I have the Lakers over the Mavericks and the Clippers over the Nuggets.
Okay, so as for my second round, I have the Milwaukee Bucks over the Indiana Pacers. I have the Brooklyn Nets over the six seed Miami Heat. And the West is where it gets interesting. I have the four seeded Portland Trailblazers once again beating the Denver Nuggets, who would be my first seed. I have them moving on again to the conference finals. And this this LA matchup, man, it's so tough. Uh, but I might get hate for this, but oh well. I'm picking the Clippers. I think that they just made too many moves that are better for the team. I have too many like question marks in my head about how some of these guys on the Lakers are going to fit. But of course, that was the mindset going in last year, so it could change. But I have the Clippers beating the Lakers in seven, moving on to the conference finals.
Yeah. So my conference finals, I have Milwaukee beating Brooklyn and the Clippers beating the Lakers as well. So I have the same finals matchup as I did last year, and neither team made it last year. But let's hope that both teams make it this year.
Yeah, for my Western Conference Finals, I have the Clippers beating the Portland Trailblazers, and a little bit different. I have the Brooklyn Nets beating the Milwaukee Bucks, and moving on to the finals. Um, where do you want to give your NBA Finals pick first?
You have Clippers over Bucks in six. I just think that we're going to see revenge Kawhi, and I think that he's going to be able to kind of replicate what he did with the Raptors when they played the Bucks and kind of just go out there and stop Giannis as best as he can. So I got Clippers over the Bucks in six.
Yeah, I have the Clippers also winning over the Brooklyn Nets in seven with Kawhi as Finals MVP. Like you said, it's pretty much a revenge season for the Clippers. So many players have so much like to make up for last season, such as like Paul George, Lou Williams, And of course, we don't know what their team's gonna like look like at the end. It seems like they might be trying to make even some more moves to get a little bit better. Uh, of course, a coaching adjustment I think is much needed for Paul George, especially. And when it comes to like their big men down low compared to Brooklyn's, I think that the Clippers just have more versatility when it comes to that. So I'm gonna give them the edge over the Brooklyn Nets in 7, and Kawhi Leonard is my Finals MVP.
Yeah, I got Kawhi as my Finals MVP as well.
Yeah, but it's really tough because I think the path I had, there's about maybe 6 or 7 teams that might be able to pull off a championship. But who knows? That's the fun of the NBA predictions, of course. Uh, but now we're gonna close off the show with something we did pretty much every episode last year, and that is the daily picks. Now, there's only gonna be a few games before we have our next show, so there's only 2 games to talk about. As for Tuesday, we have the Golden State Warriors and the Brooklyn Nets. Um, KD versus Steph Curry. Who do you have taking this one?
KD and the Brooklyn Nets.
I also got the Nets winning this one. And as for the Wednesday game, the Dallas Mavericks against the Phoenix Suns, who do you have winning this?
Yeah, I think Luca's going to come out blazing triple double, and they will beat the Suns.
I think that the Mavericks are the better team. However, I've seen that the past few years when the Mavericks and Suns have played early on in the season, the Suns usually do win those games. So I'm going to go with the Suns. I think history will repeat itself. And
We shall see.
yeah, and so obviously there's no Christmas Eve games, and that's gonna pretty much do it for this episode. I will bring up something in a second here, but any final thoughts, Johnny?
Nothing else to add. I think this year there's going to be a lot of parity in the NBA. Shortened season. We're going to see some teams take some leaps that we didn't expect. We're going to see some teams that we expected to all of a sudden jump into the playoffs, just completely miss the playoffs. We could be in line for some wild trades. So I think we're just going to have such a fun time covering the season, just because there's so many unknowns, and can't wait to do so.
Yeah, and I think even a shortened season kind of adds to the spice a little bit because there's not as much time to like for the top teams to break away in the standings per se. Um, but it's going to be interesting for sure to see. One thing that I will say though, with the show going forward, we're going to try and get some guests on here. I know for the first few episodes we've kind of been talking about our off season and the predictions, very long, and we just had to get through that. So stay tuned for that in the coming episodes. But that's pretty much going to do it for us, and we hope you guys enjoyed. And we're out. Peace.
Peace.